And good afternoon. It's Monday night. It's 8 o'clock. You know what that means. It's time for the dialogue. Dialogue with those is with you tonight. We're coming to you from beautiful, sunny South Florida. And we have guests from all over with me down here from South Florida is Brother Bilal Turner. He's going to be coming in. He's one of our local experts on all things dealing with Pan-African American rights. He's going to be joining us tonight. Brother, we have nationally known advocate for reparations. Our brother Rashaad Singleton's here tonight, and blessed to be riding shotgun with me. My beloved cousin, Sister Janis Hazel, she's coming on. And KB, we'll see about him tonight. At this point, he's just doing the R&R thing, so he may be sitting beside me later. Janis, how you doing today?
Fantastic.
What's the weather like up in the D?
Well, it's more than 1 degree, so I'm happy. I think we're 27 degrees today. The snow melted. We had a snowstorm last week, but the snow melted. So, I just had a sweater on today.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm not going to tell you how it is down here. That would do nothing but frustrate you. Let's bring our guest on today, and Brother Bilal, he's out here in South Florida. He can tell you, he can rub it in and tell you what the weather's like down here. Brother Rashaad, you're in New York, or are you in the A right now?
Yeah, I just left New York, brother, and first of all, thank you, and peace and blessings to you, and all praises for allowing me to be on the show with you today. Yeah, I'm back in Florida now, where life makes sense. It is still snowing a little bit in New York. It's a little too cold for this Florida boy.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I didn't know you were Floridian based. Okay, I thought, Brother Lil, how's it down a little bit south, a little further in the dirty down that way, down your way?
How's life? Yeah, it's warm down here. We was in the low 80s today, so it's good. We got a little winter though, but I think it's over. So we've been a little cool, which is always good to have. I mean, cool for us. I mean, y'all probably laugh at me, but we was in the high 50s and the 60s and stuff. So that was real nice for a thing.
Yeah, this 80s, man. This is I'm a golfer. I have been really busy lately. Haven't been able to get out, but the ability to play golf almost the entirety of the 2022 year, for me, maybe excepting 1 or 2 days, and there was still people. A lot of Northerners were still on the golf course, but I take, I don't have to be out there. It's going to be hot enough, like it was today. This would have been a real hot day for doing that thing. So, listen, tonight's show deals with as we culminate. This is not going to cease our African American history conversation. We're going to actually next week we're going to look at the effects of the Black church on the Black community. We're going to kind of evaluate it, and I think I'm uniquely qualified to be in both positions as a pastor, but also as an objective viewer, listener, critiquer. We're going to bring in some people who have some well-rounded ministries, not just hollering on Sunday mornings, but they have actual things that's going on 7 days a week. Their ministries, schools, human services agency, a community development corporation for first-time home buyers, and help them get loans, get qualified, get loans, and even move on to second homes. And then also that deals with a cultural arts center, so we're not depending on the school. So we're going to look at a well-rounded ministry and see how the Black church, how effective or ineffective it has been even through the pandemic or so. But tonight, we're talking about reparations, and we have some experts. I'm not going to act like I'm an expert in the field. I'm going to let the experts take it. Janis, just let us know what reparations are. If you could do that in 2 or 3 minutes, and let's get our guests right in this panel.
Well, reparations, it's just like the word repair. The root word is repair. So it's repairing for harms of the past, and it's usually financial compensation. There might be other programs tied into it, but it's usually a financial repair for something that happened. So with regards to African Americans descended of enslaved Africans, we're looking for a financial compensation for the unpaid labor, the forced labor, the wage theft that happened to our ancestors who were exploited. Their labor was exploited and they were never paid. And that trickles down through the generations, whereas the big buzzword right now that white America has woken up to and sees that there is a wealth gap. Well, why is there a wealth gap? Because Black people who were enslaved in forced bondage, forced labor, going back to 1619, where we can document that enslavement started in the United States, there was never any wage paid. And so you take that down many, many, many generations, 400 years, that's where you have the wealth gap. So effectively, just think of the root word repair. That's reparations, repairing for past wrongs upon Black people in the United States, descended of kidnapped Africans that were forced into bondage.
Okay, okay. And let me just throw this out to both you brothers, whoever wants to take a stab at this. How real is it that we can press this country to consider, and I'm using that word lightly, to consider it when it has, when reparations of some manner or another have been given to other minorities or other people in this country, peoples that, other groups of people whom have suffered atrocities here in America, in America's hands.
Do you want me to take that, or Rashaad, do you want to take that?
Want to ask Rashaad or Brother Bilal, one of you all to take that, please. And we can all weigh in on it, but.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, brother. It's very real, and all we have to do is look at history, and it will prove that throughout time and time again, reparations has been paid. The problem is everybody gets it but us. That's where I take issue with it. Why is everybody treated like a human being except the original human beings? That's the problem. Slave masters got reparations. $300 per slave released. Okay? European so-called Jewish people get reparations to this day. Japanese Americans got reparations in the 80s, and they just got reparations again. Okay? So we have seen time and time again where reparations can be paid, but is not being paid to the people who have suffered the most. Now, I think all we have to do is look at our ancestors to see how real it can be. We didn't think we could get out of slavery, brother, but we did it. We didn't think we could get the civil rights bill passed, but we did it. It always looks a little foggy going through it, but it is attainable. And one of the reasons why we were able to attain it, because our people, and more specifically, your generation and the previous generation, y'all understood the power of boycotting. We have lost that in our generation. Where is the power of boycotting? If you don't support reparations, you don't get the black dollar anymore. That's where the momentum has to come. That's where the focus has to be. Stop giving people your black dollars that don't support reparations, and the reality will come sooner than later.
Brother Bilal, weigh in, please.
Yeah. So, alhamdulillah for having me on the show. So yeah, I fundamentally agree with our guests in terms of reparations and what that means. I think we've had different scholars and stuff weigh in terms of we talk about it, but the issue becomes what is it exactly in terms of how much, right? And Dr. Sandy Darity out of Duke University has done a lot of pivotal research, not just him, but Thomas Piketty and a few others. But we're looking at upwards of $20 trillion in terms of, and that would just be like a down payment. We you know, it is, you know, some, you know, analogy that I like to use in terms of dealing with reparations and how it's not just a one time, you know, the government is just going to write a check and it'd be over when it comes to us who are descended from those slaves that were brought here to this country. But it's more like an ongoing thing. So like if you cut somebody and you cause a wound, it's very easy and very fast, but it could take, depends on how severe that cut is or how bad that wound is, it could take weeks, months, days, you know, I shouldn't say months. Hopefully it don't take months. I mean, it's a serious problem, but it'll take days or weeks. The pain and the trauma that's been caused to our people here in this country has occurred over 400 years, 375, 400 years. So there isn't a check that just can be written. This is an ongoing thing, and definitely looking at about $20 trillion. We have been pushing. I'm a member of the American Descendants of Slavery Advocacy Foundation. I don't know if any of you ever heard of that organization, but you know, we've been studying this and been dealing with this for quite some time, and we specifically are looking at it as a political situation, because when you look at how they got us into this situation, it was done through politics, through the legislative branch first, and local politics, state and federal government was involved. They reinforced it by doing terrorism, right? That was when they came in, and that terrorism came in the form of local police, sheriffs, you know, mass incarceration, so on and so forth. So the government, of course, is definitely responsible, and they put laws in place to keep us, you know, pushed down and put us into what we call a bottom caste at this point. So in order to undo this damage that's been done, it really is like a political situation. So there needs to be laws put in place. And Black folks in this country who are descendants from slaves or slavery need to be a protected class of citizen. So, I mean, protected class of citizens so that whatever cash outlay monies that we do get, that it just doesn't go right back to the white folks, right? I hear people, you know, try to criticize and talk about reparations, say, oh, you know, if every black person gets a check for $2 or $3 million, you know, they'll blow it. Which in a lot of cases that may be true because we're a victim of poverty, and with that comes a lot of other collateral damage, psychological and whatnot. But if they put things in place to have it to where we're a protected class of citizens, like how you have, you know, you protect the what is the manatees, right? You protect the manatees. Well, they need to protect Black folks in this country so we couldn't get taken advantage of. And there needs to be different things put in place to be able to ensure that our money, this nest egg or this seed that's given that we call reparations, lasts for the next 500 to 1,000 years. So that's when I talk about reparations, that's what I'm talking about. It's definitely cash money, no doubt, but there's also other things that need to be put in place to ensure that cash money that we get and the other entitlements that we deserve don't just get took away from us. Okay,
Jen, I know you stand by with the question. We've talked about this Black History Month. We've talked about Black entrepreneurism. Brother Bill McCormick and Coretta Morgan came on and showed us from the ground roots how to be a millionaire. We're talking to some. We talked about Blacks in the education system. We heard from a retired principal, Sister Lucy Thomas, and a young man who's teaching business classes, preparing our young men not only for college, but if they can get out there and start their own business to do that. And then on last week, we looked at the Black family. We had 4 generations, Jan, of our family actually was here. 4 generations from my mother on down to our grandchildren. Audience, we saved the real one for now. We really want to talk about this. Janis, go ahead.
Well, I think we need to go back to, there's reparations on a number of levels. Different states, California, here in Detroit, the Detroit City Council had a proposal out last year, which over 80% of Detroiters voted in favor of reparations for Black residents that experienced housing discrimination. Evanston, Illinois passed a resolution for discriminatory practices in housing. And so there's different trains running. My biggest concern is with the federal legislation. because the states, the cities don't really have the amount of money, which Brother Bilal mentioned, around $20,000. A number that I was looking at
Trillion.
was around 14 trillion dollars. I'm sorry, thanks for correcting that. In conversations with Bob Johnson, who is the founder of BET Networks and the first Black billionaire in the United States. So let me just walk backwards. Reparations has been talked about since Black people were enslaved in this country. Black people never wanted to be enslaved. And so there were always fights. There were lawsuits. There were a couple of people who actually in the 1800s won lawsuits for pensions for the time that they served their quote unquote masters, and just moved through the years. So we've got over 400 years of enslavement that we've got to deal with. And then all of the offshoots of enslavement. After the Emancipation Proclamation, there was another form of slavery that propped up: sharecropping, tenement farming, convict leasing. Black people were not protected. You got the 14th Amendment that is there that abolished enslavement or the institution of slavery, but it didn't make it illegal. So people were still enslaving Black people, just picking up a Black person on the street. You had the Black Codes, which is really the genesis of the police department in this country. So for me, I've been studying and working on reparations for African Americans in the United States since 1986. 1989 is when Congressman John Conyers, former congressman for Detroit in Michigan, introduced legislation at the federal level. Started out as HR 3745, introduced November 20th of 1989 when I served on his staff. And what we did for several years before the introduction is work with a number of great academicians, scholars, economists, sociologists, psychologists, historians, to really try to put together a framework. And what we introduced was a commission to study reparations proposals for African Americans. And then that morphed through the years to HR 40, which is a nod to 40 acres and a mule that African Americans never received. That was from General Sherman's field orders, I think field order number 15, right after the Emancipation Proclamation was rendered down. But what we have to recognize, America, white America, never intended for any of us here to be alive, or our parents or grandparents and our great, 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 go back in time for us to survive. Because after the war, the Civil War ended, typically you could look at us as a class of prisoners of war. Prisoners of war are given something to ease themselves into society. That's what the 40 acres and a mule were supposed to do, so that we could have our own land, work it, and have self-sustenance. But then that was reneged upon. So Black people in this country were no longer necessary, because white people in this country could no longer get free labor from us, because enslavement was abolished. And so all of these years that Black people have been trying to get reparations, it has been met with resistance, and not only resistance from white America, but Black Americans also. So advocacy, part of your dialogue this evening, is definitely necessary. But let me walk you through the legislative process and where we are right now.
Let me ask you to do that. Let me ask you this. Would you hold that? Because I know you have a rich history on that. Let me ask these brothers. I need you, if you could briefly, both of you all weigh in on this. Janis kind of scratched the surface. Janis, please stay in, because we want to know about what has happened with the legislation to try to force this to the forefront. But I want to ask you all to walk our audience, brothers, through why a need for reparations. It's not just that we are asking for something, trying, the narrative that we're always, what is the word that they use? We're always begging for something we don't deserve. We got our hand out. Just kind of give our audience who has no familiarity with what we're asking for, what the effects of slavery, just how bad. We know about the tenements in New York. We know about the slum, the poverty, but let them know just how far, just kind of share just how far behind the 8 ball we as a people are as a result of slavery from back in the mid 1800s, and how it affects us today as far as being on the equal playing field economically. If both of you brothers would weigh on that briefly, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, go ahead, brother.
All right. So, I think what we have to understand is that was our inheritance. The 40 acres, and it was actually 40 acres and a mule and $100. Actually, there was a few African Americans that General Sherman, when he was executing Field Order 15, there was about 100, maybe a little bit more than 100 African Americans that actually head of households that actually got it. And it was millions of acres that the government had during the Civil War had confiscated from those white folks who rebelled against the United States. So when General Sherman was going through the South in that area, I guess in Virginia, there was a lot of abandoned land. There was, they were taking land. And so there was a whole trail, thousands of black folks that was actually following the Union soldiers, mostly for protection. But as things were winding down, he actually executed that field order, and about maybe a little bit more than 100 folks actually got it. Shortly after that, Lincoln was assassinated. Andrew Johnson, as vice president, takes over, reneges on that, because Lincoln did what they call an executive order. Field Order 15 is actually an executive order. It wasn't an act of Congress. So when the next president came in, he just said he ain't honoring it, and told Sherman to take the land back, and he gave it back to the white folks who had actually rebelled against the country. So when we talk about what, this 40 acres and a mule, the $100 to each head of household, and we work that number up. Dr. Sandy Darity actually did a lot of research in that particular area, and it's well over $20 trillion. So this is our inheritance. This isn't asking for a handout. This is our inheritance. So if your father died, your family leave you some property or leave you something, and then you're trying to get back what was actually taken from you, actually stolen from you, can't nobody say you begging or asking for a handout. And that's a problem, and this is what we're dealing with right now. So this is our right. This is what is given to our people, and the passage of time does not eliminate a debt. It's not our fault that the folks way back then in 1866, didn't pay the debt. It's not our fault. Our ancestors was willing and ready to accept it. And just because they didn't pay it doesn't mean it's no longer relevant. And I think that's where, where we stand now. I think it has to be done. HR 40, there's been some criticisms of it, and rightly so, because it is, again, just a study. I don't think, black folks is probably the most studied group here in the United States. We've been here for 400 years. They know us. We've been here. Ain't nothing they need to figure out. Everybody can see what the effect of slavery has done to us in terms of creating us as a bottom caste class of people. So I don't think there's any studies that need to be done. I think maybe a few months ago, it was leaked out that those illegal immigrants or the people that were trying to come into the United States illegally from Central and South America, because Trump did some stuff and separated some of the children. But they were in talks with the Biden administration to write them a check for some of them for over $1 million. There was no study necessary for that. They did you had some psychologists come on TV and was talking about the effects of the damage that children separated from their mom or separated from their parents, and what kind of damage. They've been doing that to us for 200 years, 300, 400 years. So imagine the damage that's been done to us, but nobody is coming and saying, oh, we need to pay us. But yet they were willing, until it blew up, to give people who got separated from their children because they came into the country illegally during the Trump administration, talking about giving them $500,000, some of them over $1 million, which didn't make any sense. There was no study. This was just done. So when we started talking about stuff for us, you know, we have to study, we have to think about it, and it's just a bunch of games. We need to have our inheritance, and it needs to be here like now.
Bro Singleton, let me ask you this: Is it? I heard a broad picture of the effects of what slavery has, the ditch it has left us in economically. But break it down for me, Bro Singleton. How do I explain to my white brothers and sisters how it has affected us across the board economically? We're in the lesser schools. I mean, so the last 30 years, integration has kind of kicked in to try to level that playing field. But we by and large, you go to the large gated communities, we don't occupy 5% of the housing. But if you go conversely over to across town to the hood, we are 80-90% of that. Please just kind of break it down for our audience so they will lovingly know that we didn't get in these conditions because we raised our hand and chose to, but it's a carryover from the 1860s.
Absolutely, brother. You know, the hood it didn't just pop out of nowhere. You know, these neighborhoods, what we call the hood, and our people living in the slums. This was orchestrated. You see, what I say is that the hood is a prison-making machine. It's a prisoner-making machine. After just visiting New York to see the police surveillance that our people are constantly under, I have never seen a white neighborhood and 6 or 7 police vans is around that neighborhood, satellites sticking out of the van, and constant surveillance. Okay. When you have had a genocide committed on you, and there's been no type of restitution, no type of reparation, you are inevitably in this sense of still servitude, because you are still dependent on the people that put you in this very situation. And that's what we're dealing with economically. Not to sound too harsh, but it's unfortunate that white Americans in this country, they need a class of people to depend on them. And that is what the fear is about. We're not being given reparations because they need a class of people in this nation to depend on them for finances, to depend on them for housing, to depend on them in banking, to depend on them for jobs. And once we realize this, we will continue to fight more. And once we take over these institutions, our schools, our courtrooms, and our police departments, then we will see the change. It's no way in the world that you can keep a people in chattel slavery for centuries. And as our ancestors said, they were turned out like cattle. The fence was open and they're just roaming, no land being given to them. But through the strength and perseverance of our ancestors, they still was able to overcome and build wonderful communities all over this nation. We're talking from Black Wall Street to Rosewood, to Wilmington. Over and over and over again, Black people put their money together because they understood group economics. And understanding group economics is essential to reparations, because as the brother said earlier, it don't make no sense for us to get all this, you know, once we get reparations, to give it back to the people who oppressed us and took it from us to begin with. So as we fight for reparations, we have to understand group economics as well and learn how to spend money with each other and support each other. And that comes from loving each other. You see, if you love your brother, if you love your sister, you want to support them and keep the money in the community. And this is what we see the Hispanic community doing. This is what we see the European Jewish community doing. The money bounces over and over and over in their community. We have to make sure it does the same thing, especially once we get reparations. And what white Americans have to understand, there isn't going to be no let up. There isn't going to be no retreat on this issue, because I'm going to say this very simple. If I took your salary this week and I took your salary the next week, you will be looking for me. You will want to put hands on me. We're talking about not just, oh, give me a check, give me a check. We're talking about stolen wages. This can be calculated. This can be determined. And this is what we're fighting for. This is the inheritance that they're passing down to their children and to their children, to their children. That's our money. That's our money. So it's essential that we understand that reparations is key to our economic development, because once we have reparations, guess what? We control who's policing our community. Down goes police brutality. Once we control our reparations in our community, we control our education system, the teachers teaching in the community, real Black history. We won't have to have this conversation about critical race history. We just gonna call it true history or false history. You know what I'm saying? We won't have to have these comical conversations about what is true and what is not real history. It's essential. Finances is everything, and reparations is key to that. As Dr. Claude Anderson said, we may not survive another 30, 50 years without reparations.
Let me ask you this before we move on, and I'm up against a break, and I want to bring Jan in. Let me just ask you this. You said earlier you went through a list of ethnic groups in this nation that have been given reparations, and I want to ask you about. You mentioned you used the quote, you used your term, quote unquote, the so-called Jewish American. Mm-hmm. What were they given reparations for in America, and tell us the effects of that. If you can do that in 2 minutes, because we're up against this heartbreak now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So they were given reparations on a global scale for many different countries for what they were exposed to during the Holocaust, as we all know. But this is, as one of the brothers said, this is not just a check. This has been generations of wealth. For something that happened over a short period of time, generational wealth has been given to these people. And this has allowed them to open up these gigantic banking systems, and them controlling probably 95% of Hollywood, the media networks. Here we even say the Federal Reserve itself has usually, as I'm pretty sure, has been Jewish owned and Jewish controlled. We can't sit here and pretend that reparations has not been a part of that. Reparations has allowed these people to get back on their feet. And the United States is still sending billions of dollars to Israel to this day. This is what you do for a people that has had a genocide committed against them. But for some reason, when it comes to people that look like you and I, we haven't seen a red cent. And so that makes me come to the conclusion that you're able to treat other people like human beings because you see them as human beings. And it goes back to the 3/5 compromise. You can still see the mentality. These people don't see us as human beings. Therefore, they are incapable of treating us like such. And reparations is the only thing that would do that.
Okay, let me ask you, Jan. So do you know that America paid the Jewish nation or the Jewish people here in America, that America paid them a paycheck directly as we're asking for through our reparations?
Well, when we talk about the Jewish people and the Holocaust did not happen in the United States. So the United States did not pay individuals who were harmed as a result of the Holocaust. That was Germany that atoned for the harshness, the brutality, the murders. That happened in Germany. And that's not the United States. a lot of times we talk about reparations, but Germany is where the Holocaust happened. So that's not the United States money. The United States definitely gives money, as Rashaad said, to the state of Israel, but not for the Holocaust. And let's look at the Japanese that were interned after the war or during the war, because the United States was not sure if they were loyal to the United States or to their ancestral homeland of Japan. Well, those people, Japanese, were not treated like Africans that were enslaved. They did not have forced labor. And as Rashaad talked about, we're talking about wage theft for hundreds of years, wage theft that was uncompensated labor. So there's no other group in the United States of America that was treated like the enslaved African and then Black people who, through the generations, grew up here. We cannot be deported. We are the true Americans. We did not immigrate here. We were kidnapped and brought here, our ancestors, unlike the Japanese Americans, unlike the Jewish Americans. All of these other immigrant classes could be deported. You know, of course, the ones that were born here through the generations. But, you know, at the point in time that we're talking about, 1619 through 1865, we're talking about that particular period of enslavement. That is what the reparations are for. What we have to understand, and as you said, you want to be able to explain to your white brothers and sisters, is that Black people who were enslaved never received any compensation for their labor. And laws were in place that prohibited Black people from getting an education. It was illegal to learn to read. It was illegal to teach a Black person to read. So the United States of America made a class of people illiterate. It was illegal by law for Black people to own property, buy property, or inherit property. So, you know, when you just look at those two areas, that is where the lack of compensation for wages and then laws that prohibited us from being actual citizens, that has harmed us for all the generations that have come down the pike. And I know you have a break to go to, so we can go further into that.
Okay, because I do want to get back to the legislation, and I want to talk. I'm being educated myself. Reparations is something that I can't say I'm an expert in, so I wanted to be educated myself tonight. But I want to put some real questions out there so that our audience will see why this is a constant cry and it's not a handout that we're asking for. It's a payback. It's a give us a even. And you guys are making that case, and I just want to follow up on that. Dialogue with Those is brought to you on Monday nights. We're a little bit late. We're brought to you on Monday nights by the good people at moregogiggacreations.com. That's the good people. That's Latoya Glenn and Markia Johnson. They produce this show beautifully, wonderfully. That's moregogiggacreations.com. Any of your virtual needs, let me just say it like this, they got you. moregogiggacreations.com is not only able to produce you virtually, but they're able to do your web siting and able to do marketing for you. The beautiful posters that you see leading up to our shows on Monday night, it's done by them the week prior or weeks prior, and they can do that for any event that you need. And just contact them. You see the web address. That's moregogiggacreations.com. Give them a shot. They're doing wonderful things across the net. Give them a hit right now. We also like to shout out Showering Grace. Let me see. The website is called Showering Love, but it showers by grace. So showeringlove.org. They target highly condensed homeless populations. The buses, one bus has 2 showers, one has 3 showers. When our dear brothers and sisters that they call guests have had maybe their first hot shower in 2 or 3 weeks, they have clothes, not clothes that someone has worn Anything that our brothers and sisters put on coming out of those showers are brand new. So go on their website, look and see how you can volunteer. Maybe your $10 goes a long ways. ShoweringLove.org. Our dear Sister Jeannie Arbar has been with us. We're going to take a Black History moment, and we're going to do the other half of it at the end of the show instead of, we'll give a KB and my time that we normally do as I see it. But let's look at our history on what has been designated as the last week of African American History Week. You know, we don't do it like that. We're going to talk about some Black things beginning next week. So let's just hear, let's just look at our history a little bit and put it in context.
Whether called that vile, disgusting word, boy, Negro, colored, Negro, Black, or African American, we as a people are rapidly transforming an inhumane onset in these United States into ever-increasing levels of success, achievement, and comfortability. We've endured the 3/5 Compromise, the Missouri Compromise, the Fugitive Slave Clause, the antebellum United States, the Dred Scott decision, and served 8 presidents who owned slaves. And can you believe this is all before the Civil War? In that war, roughly 179,000 Black men served in the Union Army, and another 19,000 served in the Navy. We served as carpenters, chaplains, cooks, guards, laborers, nurses, scouts, spies, steamboat captains, pilots, surgeons, and teamsters. Segregation, which began with slavery, continued with Jim Crow laws, with signs used to show Blacks where they could legally walk, talk, drink, rest, or eat. Most African Americans obeyed the Jim Crow laws to avoid racially motivated violence. The Montgomery bus boycott catapulted a young Baptist pastor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who helped to navigate the civil rights movement through the Jim Crow segregation. Until then, the term separate but equal relegated Blacks to less than jobs, housing, education, and standards of living. The march in Washington served to pressure Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. After President Kennedy's assassination, President Lyndon Johnson succeeded in passing and signing significant legislation that assisted Black and poor people. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 banned discrimination in public accommodations, employment, and labor unions. And the Voter Rights Act of 1965, which expanded federal authority over states to ensure Black political participation through protection of voter registration and elections. By 1966, the emergence of the Black Panther movement and heavy Black Muslim participation expanded the aims of the civil rights movement to include economic and political self-sufficiency and freedom from white authority. Historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, which were founded when segregated institutions of higher learning did not admit African Americans, continue to thrive and educate students of all races today. There are 101 HBCUs representing 3% of the nation's colleges and universities. Politically and economically, African Americans have made substantial strides during the post-civil rights era. In 1967, Thurgood Marshall became the first African American Supreme Court Justice. In 1968, Shirley Chisholm became the first Black woman elected to the U.S. Congress. In 1989, Douglas Wilder became the first African American elected governor in U.S. history. Carol Moseley Braun of Illinois became the first African American woman elected to the U.S. Senate. There were 8,936 Black office holders in the United States in 2000, showing a net increase of 7,467 since 1970. In 2001, there were 484 Black mayors. The late General Colin Powell served 2 U.S. presidents, one as Secretary of State. Condoleezza Rice also served as Secretary of State under President George W. Bush. General Lloyd Austin now serves as the Secretary of Defense. His has a major influence during this current Russian crisis. Reverend Jesse Jackson made strong runs for the U.S. presidency, charting the path in 1984 and in 1988, when he was a runner-up for the Democratic nomination.
And we'll be back in the second half of that at the end of the show, which we are running right up against in just a second. I want to throw this out to everybody. And Jen, we are going to talk about legislation because I have a real question to ask about that. But I would like for the panel to discuss with our audience, because there's this implication that we as African Americans are prone to criminal behaviors. I want you all to just kind of share what our economic disadvantages, how that correlates to some of the criminal. I mean, I'm talking about legitimate criminal statistics that we're involved in the system. You all can just take that as you please. If you just take 2 minutes apiece so we can get some other questions in. And I have a call, so she has questions, but I kind of want to deal with that. So just the three of you, want to hear all of you on that. 2 minutes, please.
Well, I don't think that Black people are any more prone to commit crimes, whether they be so-called white-collar crimes, banking, embezzlement, fraud, or murder, or a sexual assault. I don't think that we are any more prone to do that than any other group of people, race or ethnicity. When we talk about conditions that have caused some people within the African American or Black community to do things to survive, such as the crack cocaine that was brought in by the CIA, by the United States government, and planted in predominantly Black communities. Yes, some of us took advantage of that because there were little to no other economic opportunities for us to participate in. And so we got caught up in that trade. I lived in Washington, D.C. for over 30 years. And in the 1980s, when the crack cocaine epidemic hit, there was a very brilliant young man by the name of Rayful Edmonds who marshaled his street lieutenants and other, if you call it manufacturing, distribution. He had a distribution network that was marvelous. And for whatever reason, he felt that that was the only way that he could make money. But if he had had other opportunities, the education and the exposure to other opportunities, perhaps Wall Street, perhaps being an entrepreneur in quote unquote legitimate franchises, he would probably be a billionaire at this point in time. But he got caught up in the drug trade, and he marshaled a number of other Black men into the drug trade, and he's still in prison. And a number of other Black men. But I mean, to your point in your question, I don't think there are any statistics that will bear out that Black people are more destined, or if we are genetically engineered to have a propensity towards crime. Sometimes the conditions that we live in will cause that. Now, you of course have seen crime up close and personal, being in law enforcement for many years. So I'm sure you have another perspective, but a Black child born in the United States does not grow up wanting to be quote unquote a criminal. But if the conditions surrounding that child are not one that allows it to get an education, allows it to even be exposed to what the opportunities and jobs and careers are, then that may be where that Black child will go, or that white child, or that Asian child. It's the conditions that are created around them. So there's a context that I think we have to deal with also.
Brother Leo, the next in 2 minutes, could you kind of pick up where she left off by just talking about the effects on the lack of reparations or our economic conditions, how they do play in? And you're right, Jan. And I always had to walk that line of being an African American in America and knowing conditions. And I actually did a season in narcotics, and it really pressed my conscience and my soul with the drug sales. But I kind of looked at it, and maybe, and Lord knows this is almost blasphemy for me to say this, but it was almost that bootstrap thing. Instead of poisoning our community, bro, you got to sell some pop bottles, which we did back then. You got to find a way to survive without hurting our community further. Brother Bilal, what's your take on that, the correlation with crime and economic disadvantages? If you could do it like $1.50.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd just like to, an agreement that, there's nothing pathologic about being Black, and a lot of people do that. There's something wrong with us, right? Why can't they get their stuff together? We're victims in all of this. It's almost like blaming a woman or even a man who got raped, blaming him for getting raped in the first place, or blaming her for getting raped in the first place. And you see a lot of that stuff happening. A lot of Black folks, we even do that to ourselves, just simply because it's just the damage is there. There's a lot of Dr. I think Joy Grenade, she did wrote the book called The Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And I think a lot of us, I read the book, a lot of us should take some time and read the book. But you'll see a lot of stuff. There's nothing pathologic about us. If you put any group of people into a situation that we've been put in, they do it. And for a period of time when the Irish first came over here, they were caught up in the same thing. When Italians first came over here, they was caught up in the same thing. But with the onset of the New Deal program during the Great Depression, these groups were allowed into the quote unquote white club. So they became white. The Jews and the Irish, they were not considered that. They were actually, the Irish were on a lower social economic scale than Black folks. And there's another book called How the Irish Became White. I also would advise people just to read that, but you get to understand, one of the problems I'm in with this, one of the problems with America in terms of type of capitalism that we practice here in this country is that this type of capitalism requires somebody to be on the bottom. And it was just so convenient and so easy to make us that people, right? And I think what we need to do, that's kind of like the 5,000-pound gorilla in the room is the capitalism. And those type of things need to be addressed also in terms of when we talk about
Bro Rashaad, thank you, bro. Bro Rashaad, I was actually on South Beach, and I was with someone who was pointing out to us the residents that they're actually on South Ocean Avenue, where Scarface, where one of the iconic scenes from Scarface was filmed, and it was almost the inference was that's a major tourist attraction, so it's glorifying this Hispanic brother who came over here, and again, not glorifying the drug trade for survival, but the drug trade was what that movie was precipitated upon. And but we're down because of real life movies, like we know the scene in the latter scene in New Jack City when it was all spilled out in the courtroom, which kind of really told a story. Kind of pick up on that for us in the next 2 minutes, if you would, and share it with the audience. I just want to share. I want America to know what disadvantages, how individuals survive when disadvantages are thrust upon them. I'm not giving anybody a card out for going out and being involved in crimes, but there's a reality to having to survive when you're under the 8 ball. I think you're muted. Bro Singleton, I think you.
Hear me?
Yes, sir, we got you.
No? You got me? Okay. That's a great question, brother. And what that we're dealing with a situation of a country kind of setting us up for failure. You see, it's not hard to create an impoverished community. We know many of our brothers and sisters left the South, sold their land for cheap, or either they had it stolen from them to go chase jobs in the North. Sister Janis, you know this better than me. All our brothers and sisters came to Detroit, wanting to work in the car factories. They came to all different places in New York and New Jersey. Well, once we began to get economically stable, what happened to a lot of those jobs? They disappeared. So if I take all the jobs away from your community and I put up liquor stores on every block, and then you somehow get pure Colombian cocaine, black people didn't have no plans to be going to Colombia, getting this stuff. Black people don't own no gun companies. We're talking about, we got stories of boxes of guns being left in black communities. Where are they coming from? You see, but when you take out all the money from a community, people are going to figure out a way to survive. And unfortunately, drugs is the only money that's constantly flowing. That's the only currency that's constantly flowing through every community. And that's what we have to understand. It's not just the black community. White people do drugs like black people do drugs. White people commit crimes like black people commit crimes. The problem is who's getting prosecuted, who's getting the guilty verdict. You see, they are getting let out. It makes no sense that the United States has over 2 million prisoners. Half of them are black. And that makes up for 1/8 of the world prisoners being African American. That is not by circumstance and coincidence. That is done purposely, you see. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. These people, they have to have some type of class that's in a dependent state. And we have constantly been fighting the stereotypes. You remember back in the early 1900s, they had the black people eating the watermelon with the, just shucking and jiving and all this silly stuff. And then they come when the civil rights, we had all our black people wearing suits and so much class and so much pride. In comes the pimp and prostitute movies. All this propaganda constantly being put on our people. Stereotypes. No, it's not that black people are natural criminals or anything. We are people that's oppressed and we're trying to survive. As you said, drugs is not a cop-out, but if you don't give a brother no means to make money, if you don't give a sister no means to make, man, she got a child starving at home, you are pushing them to go into crime. And that's what we're seeing. The very images, negative images that we are seeing of ourselves. Well, who's putting it out there? Who? Don't tell me that the rapper is rapping bad lyrics. I want to know who is paying the rapper. When are we going to start holding some of these people accountable? So we're dealing with false stereotypes, but thank God we have people such as you, such as Sister Janis, such as our other brother, that are, you're the cream of the crop. And when you got good black people come together and be able to have dialogue like this where other people can see that, oh, well, I guess black people ain't all crazy. No, we're not all crazy. We're just frustrated with the injustice, and we're saying we need reparations for everything we've been through right now, not later, but right now.
Okay, I want to add. Let me ask this real quick, Jan, and then we're going to do a round of wrap up. And Jan, you may, with your legislative background, you may be in a better position to kick this off. When we look at our nation now, we look at the economic situation, we look at, we've just doled out money for the pandemic relief for folk. Right now, we're looking at this craziness that's going on in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. We don't know what's going to happen with that. I have people in my ministry and family members that went to a peacetime military. We always knew the possibilities, and all of that is just question marks. Is this a time? I know President Biden has come under a lot of a severe microscope by the black community because of issues like voters' rights and things like that. We saw him get off and really push for that down in Atlanta and other places. But what I'm asking is, is this a time that we can realistically press the calls for reparations?
Okay, so
Financially and
you're
otherwise?
throwing that to me. Realistically, yes, we should always be requesting our paycheck. If you worked for 30 years during the prime of your life and never got paid, would you stop requesting the wages that were stolen from you? Wouldn't you be going to a lawsuit to your state board of labor? That's what we're asking for. It's not a handout. It is what is due. It is a debt that should be paid. Should have been paid a long time ago. But
Jan,
I want to
let me
just
ask
harken
you
back.
real quick, Jan. I want to ask you this because you were right there in Washington time. The last time America had a positive bank account was during the Clinton administration. Now it's plummeted ever since. Of course, the Gulf War, not the Gulf War, but the Bin Laden War, and then this guy that was in office that y'all put in 4 years ago really plummeted us by patting the pockets of his billionaire friends. Would it stand a better chance when we're in better shape as a nation economically of realistically obtaining this? Just kind of tell me what you think about it. You got that experience on Capitol Hill.
I'm not that kind-hearted. I say turn the financial spigot off to the other nations that we are funding and giving money to. You see, Africans stolen, kidnapped from Africa, and then forced into bondage and forced labor. We are Americans. We were born here. Those of us after the Africans were kidnapped, we were born here. So our ancestors have paid taxes once they started working, after enslavement. This is a debt owed. So I really don't care about the national debt. There's been so much money to go outside of this country right now. $350 million, I heard last week, was going to the Ukraine. And it's not that I am not empathetic for their cause, but let us be real. I don't have the bandwidth for white people fighting white people. Not when there's a genocide in the United States that has never been addressed for Black people. So it is a debt that is due. And we, as Black people in this country, need to rise up and request what is ours, demand it. We've gone through so many administrations that have never even dealt with it. Right now, today, because the framework of reparations is there, this president could sign an executive order to launch, if you want to go the route of a task force or a commission, which is what the legislation HR 40 and S40 is, could put that into effect, do the research, present the report to the president and to the Congress, and then we have the dialogue of these are the forms of reparation that the greatest minds in this country have delivered to us, and this is how we're going to start dispensing it. I really don't care about the economic status of this country. Whether or not we have to print money, I still want my 40 acres and a mule in today's financial dollars, because that is what was due. Both our grandmothers, our grandmother Hazel was born in 1903. My grandmother Jones was born in 1903. My grandfather on my mother's side was born in 1900. Our grandfather on the Hazel side was born, I believe, in 1893. They knew their grandparents who were enslaved people. So I had the luxury of talking to my mother's mother before she died. She was 89 when she died. And she told me about all of the hardships that she encountered in Alabama. Okay. So the United States has money when it wants to have money. So why not have the money to right the wrongs, the original sin of this country, and provide the reparations to the people who were damaged, who were brought here and exploited, so that we can move forward. First, they need to atone and address that this happened and stop trying to erase the actual history of this country. It is what it is, and then move forward. So I'm not that benevolent. The United States has money when it wants to have money, and there's a spigot of money going to a lot of other countries that has not serviced the debt that is owed to African Americans, to Black people.
Brothers, I'm going to ask you to make a concluding statement, but in your concluding statement, give me a response to this question. Here's the question. You know what, and Jan, you know how this is. It's a 50-50 Congress, 50-50 Senate, but it's almost a 50-48 question mark Senate. So for anything to get done, it has to clear a Senate. And there's one side of those aisles that is united from everything from voter rights to anything that since the last president, he made it cheap that you don't have to address the needs of downtrodden Black people or anything. He made it that the Republican Party can stand against that and withstand the onslaught of them being called racist and everything else. It used to be that was something that concerned them. Just like the Me Too movement made it where a guy who used to could wink at a girl, you can't do that now. So, but it has reversed in that order that part of the legislature or the Senate is just blocked. Anything that helps reparations, voter right, which is just a central, fundamental part of this country's heritage, all of these things out the door. How, I want to ask you guys, how, Janet said she doesn't care. Let me ask you, how suicidal politically would it be for the administration to address the area of reparations in this climate of a basically Senate that has freedom to vote anti-Black and not have to cover it? Do that in the concluding statement, Brother Bilal and Brother Rashaad, please.
All right. So I think what one thing that we need to understand, first of all, is that, and I agree with everything that Janis is saying. Boy, Janis got me all fired up. Politics is an exchange, right? It's not a gift. And I think that's what a lot of us as Black folks, we don't understand. We have the Congressional Black Caucus, and to be honest, they all need to go. Most of them, probably 99% of them need to go. They need to understand that they're put there to serve the interests of us. If you go to I think they changed their website, but if you go to Congressional Black Caucus, they don't really say anything specific to Black folks who are descendants of slaves in terms of our needs and what we need to have. But if you go to the Latino Caucus, they specifically say they're there for the interests of the Latino people. So we got these issues. We got people in there. I mean, you know, politicians, unfortunately, they kind of sell themselves, and that's bad. But I think what we can do is put pressure on them. They respond. Politicians respond to pressure. They do not respond to applause. Politics is an exchange. It is not a gift. So when we put them in there, we need to be very clear about what we expect you to do when you get in there. And if you don't do it, we need to vote you out. There's no reason why, you know, Biden playing all these little games and doing all and talking about Joe Manchin this and Kristen Sinema that. That's not our problem. None of that is our problem. Biden has the ability to do certain executive orders that can release billions of dollars. Right now, in terms of using the military and their advertisement dollars that they can release when they do go army this and go army that, they can pump those advertisements into, say, when they do commercials with the HBCUs playing football games and basketball games and whatnot, and a lot of that money can go to those universities, right? And I'll end with this. One of the big things that he was trying to talk about was increasing the endowments for Black HBCUs, but it was something real low, like $30 trillion or something like that, or 30 billion, not even trillion, $30 billion. But that's to be split up of a little bit more than 100 schools. When you look at the top endowment, Harvard and Stanford have 1 and 2 of the top endowments here in the United States. Their endowment alone is greater than the endowment of all HBCUs combined. And so Black folks, we don't understand. We're getting sold like, $5 chicken dinner. We don't understand that when you talk about a school like Harvard having billions of dollars, almost $1 trillion, 50 trillion, billion dollars in an endowment, and all the HBCUs, we don't even have $1 billion. And then Biden is able to come in there and promise Black folks, oh, we're gonna give y'all 10 billion or 30 billion, and we go, oh yeah. But as compared to what? This is always the problem. As compared to what? We are 35 or 32 million people plus in this country. We're what we call, I figure we're the sleeping giant, and we just don't know the political power that we actually have. But the problem is we don't hold our representatives accountable. Biden would not have been the president of the United States if it wouldn't have been for black folks. But there was no ask. It should have been a commission of people saying, okay, if you want us to get our vote, then this is what you need to do. There was none of that happen. We just were like the mules for the Democratic Party and just put that man up in there. And look at us now. We don't have nothing. And until we adopt that mentality, we're going to be in a hard position.
Brother Rashaad, boy, Bilal kind of lays it out there. From the Black Caucus to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, he takes no prisoners. Go ahead, brother Rashaad, please.
Yes, brother. To just piggyback off of what the brother was saying, we have to ask ourselves, who are these leaders and what are they really truly doing for us? We in the National Reparations League are developing the Reparations Report Card. This will be an app that you can download on your phone to know which politician is for reparations and which one's not. Because the ones that are not, the ones that are worried about political suicide, they have to go. To get the Asian crime bill, it only took 2 Asian senators, the lady from Illinois, and I think it was another lady from Hawaii. They basically told Biden, look, if you don't pass this bill, you're not going to get our vote on anything. And just them two would offset the entire voting thing. They said it wasn't going to get anything passed if he doesn't pass this bill. And I'm trying to, where is our 2 black senators at that's saying this? I haven't heard this. You see, so it just takes a matter of heart and testicular fortitude to not worry about political suicide, because we're going to be going through another type of suicide if we don't get reparations. Tonight, fought for reparations. That is a suicide in some sense. You see, to just give up and lay down arms, that's the suicide. To not fight, to fight. That's making yourself heroic. That's making yourself remembered in history. Biden told us we're not black if we don't vote for him. And that's all he had to say. We're constantly being used as pawns. Even back to Clinton. Clinton coming on Arsenio Hall playing the jazz saxophone. Hillary Clinton going on the Breakfast Club, reaching in her bag for hot sauce. What is this? All these people ain't talk, including Barack Obama, ain't approach reparations like they should have because they're worried about political suicide. Y'all worried about what white folks think. But see, these are the people that can no longer serve us. If you're not for reparations, we're coming for you and we're going to remove you from office, because we can no longer, everything, police brutality, school funding, health care, all of these things are related to not getting reparations. So we're not worried about the politicians that are worried about political suicide. We need to find the individuals who don't care, that will fight through anything. We need to push them and support them and get them in office until we get the job done.
Let me just say this, Joselle, let me say this before you back off, because I'm a policy person and the mechanics of what I see needs to be done. And again, I was at the table 33 years ago when we drafted legislation at the federal level. Here we are 33 years later. As Bilal said, this president can, by executive order, sign in a reparations policy bill. Whatever it is. Now, there does need to be a study on how much money and what forms. That's what that legislation is about. So what can be done is this president could, by executive order, sign that in tomorrow, okay? But it has to be a demand. Frederick Douglass said nearly 200 years ago, power concedes nothing without a demand. Part of my background is being a lobbyist also, working for members of Congress, but also working for corporations and getting legislation passed because I had the money behind me, which these legislators wanted for their political campaigns. And so anything I wanted, I got it because I did not take no for an answer. And we as Black people need to go with that thought in mind. As Rashaad said, there needs to be, in fact, the National Reparations League is putting together a congressional report card. And you see, we need to have a letter writing campaign, a social media campaign that demands that reparations in whatever forms we decide happens. As Bilal said, Congressional Black Caucus, and I've worked for Black members of Congress from Shirley Chisholm, Congressman John Conyers on down. There's 56 Black members of Congress right now that primarily represent Black districts. There's redistricting happening, but right now they pretty much represent Black districts. As you said, Bilal, if you go to the Congressional Black Caucus website, you will not see reparations in their platform under economic justice or under social justice and reforms. Why is that? I mean, that's a huge question for me. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee reintroduced H.R. 40 after Congressman John Conyers retired. So from 2017 on, she has introduced it and gotten it further than we've ever gotten it, which has gotten to the Judiciary Committee, a hearing, but it's got to go out to the floor. All of us Black folks live all over this country. Right now, there's only 196 Black members, I'm sorry, not Black, 196 members of Congress that have co-sponsored H.R. 40. When you look at the congressional route of getting that legislation passed. In the Senate, there's a companion bill, S-40, that only 22 members of the United States Senate, all Democrats, had co-sponsors. Co-sponsoring it upon introduction means you're pledging your support. So, you know, a strategy which I know that the National Reparations League has, along with some of my thoughts on this, is we have to take action. You know, we've talked about this, but we have to take action. And that's the missing link. Political suicide. I've been an elected official, and never did I care about winning the next election. I won 3. I beat an incumbent, and I won 2 other times until I resigned and moved. But, you know, that's irrelevant. You have to be able to speak truth to power, and I've done that. And so Black people need to stand up and demand it. And that is something that we have not done. We have not collectively throughout the United States held our congressional representatives accountable for what we want. And that is where we are now. That's what we need to do.
I want to ask of the 3 of you all, and I know you talked to the producer beforehand, if you have a website or a site of where you can sign on to advocate for reparations. If you didn't, please go back when the broadcast is over and just type it in the comments, and it'll be there. And speaking of that, the producers has put a lot of documentaries and facts in the comment section that we were not able to get into the show tonight. So please go back and we're asking you to share this show out. Tell people about it. This has been a most informative and eye-opening discussion tonight for something that I have had little knowledge of. Brother Rashaad, Brother Bilal, you always, Brother Rashaad, just meeting you, Brother Bilal, you always bring on all things advocacy for the community. You always right on top of it, and you came just as you were advertised, Brother Rashaad. I saw in the very beginning. What I want to do is I want to bring you back on. Is particularly, you intrigue me because that's my area of law enforcement. I've been removed from the law enforcement community 40 plus years, but you really got me intrigued. I want to talk about you're talking about those surveillance vehicles. That's disturbing to me. And you guys have fired me up. You guys, the guys, no gender into the 3 of you have fired me up that Black history does not stop at the dialogue today. We're going to talk about some things next month. And real early, as soon as I can get you back on, Brother Rashaad, I want to deal with Blacks in the criminal justice system. I back that out of this show to have times for just reparations. But with your new facts and studies and observations, I want to coordinate with you to get you back on, and we'll do a short, and Kim will be here for that. He's the most retired police officer. And let's just look at that and look at some of the inadequacies in the system, injustices, and where we can get better. Let's have that conversation. Brother Rashaad,
absolutely, brother. Be my pleasure.
Bless you. Brother Bilal Shabazz, you just always bring, and I appreciate your willingness to come on at all times. Thank the two of you all. And Jan, bless you for being here tonight. We're going out a little special tonight. It's kind of a celebration of our history, a continuation of what you saw earlier. But Jan, thank you so much. Here, appreciate it. Thank you for pushing this card with me. I have been so enriched tonight by learning more about reparations. And
Absolutely.
You're making a definite advocate. Bless you all. Thank you. Dialogue next week. We're going to look at the effect of the Black church in the Black community. That's next Monday night. Hopefully KB will be here, and we're going to discuss that. And we're asking you to join us back. And then as soon as I can get Brother Shabazz back recommitted, and I hope it's consecutive weeks, because I'm kind of like wanting to show Black history does not stop with what has been given to us as Black History Month, because we are American history. And so I want to really just investigate everything to make American society and culture better. Dialogue with Dozy. Next Monday night, 8 o'clock, we'll be looking for you. We're going out a little different tonight.
On November 4th, 2008, Democratic Senator Barack Obama became the first African American to be elected president. 95% of African American voters voted for Obama as he garnered overwhelming support from young and educated whites, a majority of Asians and Hispanics, picking up a number of new states in the Democratic electoral column. Though losing the white voter demographic, he won a larger proportion of white voters than any previous non-incumbent Democratic presidential candidate since President Jimmy Carter. Obama was re-elected by a similar margin on November 6, 2012. In 2021, Kamala Harris became the first woman, the first African American, and the first Asian American to have served as Vice President of the United States. There are more African American billionaires than ever. Oprah Winfrey, Robert Smith, Patrice Matsi, LeBron James, pop star Rihanna, and many more follow the entrepreneurship genius of Madam C.J. Walker, Mr. James Johnson, and Miss Barbara Hughes. From the Harlem Renaissance to hip-hop, African Americans have dazzled the entertainment industry. Whether the smooth footwork of Duke Ellington or the light footing of Sean P. Diddy Combs, we've danced from Detroit to Dallas. Whether Nat King Cole singing Unforgettable or Al Green crooning I'm Still in Love with You, our undeniable voices have charmed a nation and a world. We've used our gifts to champion causes and concerns. Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday to Ya helped to propel the national holiday commemoration of Dr. King's birthday. Upon seeing the social unrest and ecological abuses of Marvin Gaye as What's Going On, and Public Enemy admonished advocates to fight the power. Aretha, Alicia, Mary J., and many more have modeled and quietly challenged many a young lady to bless this world with their gift of artistry. African Americans have dominated sports. Who doesn't remember Muhammad Ali's I Am the Greatest, or Jim Brown dominating the NFL and leaving at a young age to initiate a successful movie career? Our presence is highly prevalent in every pro sports Hall of Fame. Serena and Venus Williams' double-decade dominance of women's tennis, and Tiger Woods' powerful reign as a pro golfer helped African Americans to diversify their sports appetites. If it's Michael Jordan or LeBron James question, or was it the era of Ken Griffey Sr. or Jr.? African Americans have influenced the sports world during every generation, every decade, and every season. From an Underground Railroad to the audacity of a dream spoken one hot August in 1963, we're not only survivors, we're thrivers. From a season of blatant segregation to a pattern of unjustified police killings, we're still here. From Emmett Till to George Floyd, the fight for justice and equality marches on. Whether a corporate boardroom or a scientist laboratory, Our excellence prevails. Wimbledon, the Masters, the Olympics, Bill Russell's NBA Most Valuable Players trophy, we win them all. More Academy Awards, more trips into space, more first place finishes, more passing of the baton to the next guy or girl. Our future is bright. African Americans have far more to conceive, far more to believe, and far more to achieve. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come, treading our path with the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, with the white gleam of our bright star is cast. Yes, McFadden and Whitehead, there ain't no stopping us now.